Welcome to Act Like a Feminist Artist. We have two wonderful speakers and readers today, Lindsay G. and Donna Kaz. First we have Lindsay G. Lindsay G. is a writerly type who has focused on the intersections of feminism, sexuality, and pornography for the past decade as a reviewer, interviewer, critic, documentary filmmaker, blogger, and now author of Watching Porn, an informative book about the adult entertainment industry cleverly disguised as a memoir. Her work across multiple genres and areas of interest has appeared in places like Glamour.com, MEL Magazine, Refinery 29, Bitch Magazine, Nerve.com, Best Magazine, McSweeney's, Internet Tendency, Luna Magazine, Auto Straddle, and elsewhere. After many years of doing daily battle with the New York City subway system, she now resides in Missoula, Montana, where she's the co-founder of an independent comic book, graphic novel, and art book publishing company. So I have this little mic on here. I don't know if it's, can you hear it through speakers? I can't really tell from here.
In the ceiling.
Oh.
So it kind of just spreads out, but everybody should indicate if you can hear back there.
Okay. I'm pretty good at projecting also, so either way, hopefully we'll be covered. So I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of my book. It picks up when I had just accepted sort of the challenge to be a porn DVD reviewer in 2007. I was 24, I was living in New York, I was desperate for money, and the first job that I was offered was reviewing porn DVDs for a girly magazine. And I thought, sure, that sounds awesome. I'm gonna be so cool. Everyone is gonna think I'm the coolest person they've ever met. So I was given a box full of porno DVDs and sent home, and I popped the first one into the DVD player, and this is sort of my experience with my first actual porno DVD reviewing gig. It was called, by the way, East Coast Assault, ASS. Yeah, good stuff. As I popped East Coast Assault into the shared DVD player in the living room of my apartment in Harlem, I envisioned myself in a few months' time, wearing a beret and a black turtleneck with a cigarette holder, never mind that I'd never been a smoker, and a glass of wine, telling my rapt friends about my first film reviewing experience. This film asked some really important questions about what butt stuff really means, I would drawl, receiving impressed nods in response. But East Coast Assault did not open my eyes to a new existential contemplation of filmed sex acts. It did, however, deepen my understanding of the reality of the porn industry and inspire me in a line of questioning that to this day has not ended. The conceit of the film was that a tired, oversexed porn actor, also the film's director and producer, was trying to get away from his grueling schedule in Los Angeles by vacationing on the drearier side of the country. But everywhere he went, some voracious acquaintance, or several, would seduce him, and sometimes his friends too. And so on video, he fucked his way through Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Montreal, maybe Toronto or Providence, I don't remember. Anyway, it was a solid 5-hour marathon that contained the same kind of hardcore, frill-free, pared-down boning I'd been watching on the internet for years, but with slightly better production quality. I remember being confused. This was not what I thought I had signed up for. But then again, some of my ethical qualms were allayed. I knew where it came from, for instance. There were credits all over the place, a notice of where the legal records were being kept, and professional editing to indicate that somebody gave a damn about the product. I knew that everyone in the film had been paid for their work, that the women involved had consented to do what they were doing, and had signed papers to that effect. And for all my dismay over the bursting of my internet porn bubble, East Coast Assault didn't exactly disappoint me. Thanks. In fact, the scene filmed in New York was exceptionally arousing. Sexy. It was a threesome shot in a hotel room, and the two women involved were extremely, vocally, voraciously enthusiastic. I don't just mean that they seemed to enjoy themselves, I mean they loved it. They were smiling and laughing and squealing and clearly getting off again and again. For sex-shamed little me, it was hugely erotic to see women so into the sex they were having, and I didn't feel bad about enjoying myself as I watched them. True, there was a lot of slapping and spitting that I didn't find erotic per se, but it was made sexy by the sheer enjoyment of the participants. Their excitement obliterated my queasiness. But as I soldiered on through hours 2, 3, and 4 of the double-disc set, my qualms came roaring back. There was a scene filmed in Montreal in which the woman seemed uninterested at best, intoxicated at worst. Whatever the case may have been, she did not look aroused or even really there for most of the 45-minute scene. I wanted to skip it, but I had to review the entire film, so I stuck it out, wincing the whole way through, as I blearily was reminded of one of the worst moments of my own life, being sexually assaulted while I wasn't fully conscious. Her placid face and lethargic movements felt deeply wrong, and I wondered if the fact that she had signed the same papers and had been paid the same as the other women in the film made her clearly uninspired performance, strictly speaking, okay. In a way, the big questions I had hoped to find buried in the artistic subtext of the film were here, writ large and less than artsy. Why had this model signed up to do the scene if she didn't want to? Was she just there for the money? Did she hate what she was doing? Was she being exploited? Was the act of watching her exploitative in itself? Or was she exploiting my willingness to watch her, no matter what state she was in? How did this work? I'd gone into this first review strong in my belief that the women I would be watching were as empowered as anybody else, and that I would be supporting them in their choice of profession by viewing their work. But the Montreal scene made me question that resolve and the principles upon which it had been based. If their profession involved them having sex that upset me personally, would I stand by their decision to pursue it? And more than that, should I? Now that the imaginary veil between real and internet porn had been ripped down, I had to grapple with issues I'd been sweeping under the rug of my latent, lazy feminism. The gross internet porn I'd been watching for years had largely flown under my radar. I tried to avoid thinking about it outside of a few post-orgasm moments of contemplation. My participation in this kind of ambiguity should have indicted me to my own conscience, but I told myself that I didn't know the truth of any of it, so I had no right to judge. I had considered myself a feminist ever since the question arose sometime in high school, but I had never really examined what that meant to me. I attended a tiny rural public high school that offered neither AP classes nor any philosophy outside of what was necessary to get through literature courses. And then I went on to college at a Catholic university that I liked because the buildings looked like castles, not because I was Catholic. I wasn't. Sex was just as taboo at my undergrad institution as it had always been before, and though I thought often, long, and hard, about the topic, I had received zero formal education on the intersection of sex and feminism. I eagerly participated in the scant few feminist and sex-positive activities available to me, from a few hotly protested productions of the Vagina Monologues to the Rocky Horror Show, but they didn't exactly round up to a strong background in feminism. I knew nothing of the feminist porn activists of the 80s and 90s, Candida Royalle, Annie Sprinkle, Nina Hartley, all of whom I would later go on to meet. But I was familiar with the anti-porn feminists who had started the feminist sex wars that raged through the late 70s and early 80s. Andrea Dworkin, Catherine McKinnon, and their ilk, for whom female empowerment could not possibly be tied up with sex work. Those rabid activists, whose men are pigs and women are victims theories, as summed up by Nina Hartley in an interview, had gained enough traction internationally to become the most recognizable face of modern feminism in the 90s. I knew of them, and I knew that I vehemently disagreed with them. Even with my copious intake of borderline scary smut on the internet, I recognized that one couldn't reduce the vast landscape of pornography into the evil category. It felt small-minded and reductive to try to pigeonhole the thousands of people who made it, or the hundreds of thousands of films they made, into any one box. Surely not all pornography is wholly empowering to women, and some of it absolutely can feed into an attitude of misogyny. But is all porn, then, by definition, bad for women? Certainly not. The logic doesn't follow well enough in my mind to even bother pursuing, and so, for the most part, I hadn't. It's an interesting phenomenon that I've seen in other places, however. In conversations with anti-porn activists at industry conventions, protesting outside film festivals with their consumers in their homes, and even with some pornographers, I've heard all manner of generalizations made about porn, as if it's one monolithic entity, usually with a single, clear aim in mind: to destroy American morality, or to drive humanity to onanistic damnation, or whatever other doom these crusaders have read in the tea leaves. It's never been clear to me how one industry could be so single-minded. In my experience, pornography is a massive and varied organism that some refuse to even call an industry. Tim von Swine, a long-standing male performer and director, for instance, once told me, "I don't like saying industry because porno is not an industry. When you have an industry, there are protocols and standards that you adhere to and you regulate. There's not that regulation in porn. It's a bunch of free enterprise, a bunch of pirate ships." Pornography in America is spread out, decentralized, and fiercely individualistic. Basically, even if there are slimy, evil, rapey pornographers out there seeking to exert control over women in heinous ways, and don't get me wrong, there definitely are, they don't speak for all pornographers everywhere. For every one of the outright skeezy porn makers I've met, there is at least one beautiful human being who sees porn as a way to express the beauty of sex through art. But when I started writing for porn magazines, I hadn't thought about any of this. My solitary contemplations of sex-positive feminism had left me with a few basic stances. I believed that women should be afforded the same rights and opportunities as men, and that they should be free to make their own decisions about their lives and their bodies. Ostensibly, this led me to support the women who made porn or did any other form of work that involved them using their bodies at their discretion. Like legendary performer Nina Hartley told Rolling Stone in 2016, "If I have a right to choose birth control, to choose abortion, then I have the right to choose to fuck for a living." End of story. But now, I had to start thinking about who the people I supposedly supported actually were, who they'd been all along, and what we were all participating in. That's it. I'm going to turn the floor over.
Thank you, Lindsay. Now we have Donna Kaz. Donna Kaz joined the Guerrilla Girls in 1997 and led their foray into attacking discrimination in the theater world. Using the pseudonym Afra Ben, she spent 20 years traveling around the world with performances and street theater actions created to address issues like gender parity, reproductive rights, and an end to violence against women. Her memoir, Unmasked, explores the challenges of living as an activist and artist, creating work that proves feminists are funny while wearing a rubber gorilla mask. Please join me in welcoming Guerrilla Girl Donna Kaz, aka Afra Ben.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Afra Ben. I was born in 1640, and I think I look pretty good. Actually, I'm really loud. I'll try to speak. There you go. Actually, Afra Ben is not my real name. It's my stripper name. It's not my stripper name. It's my Guerrilla Girl name. Every member of the Guerrilla Girls takes the name of a dead woman artist, and when we appear in public, we wear gorilla masks to conceal our true identities. We do this to focus on the issues of sexism and discrimination instead of on ourselves. In other words, people can't accuse us of doing this just to promote our own careers in theater or in the arts. So today I stand before you unmasked because I'm here to promote my own career in the arts. No, seriously, I decided to unmask and write this memoir because I started to feel that it was sort of pathetic that for 20 years I had to go around wearing this hot, sweaty gorilla mask and use the name Afra Ben to get anyone to pay attention to sexism and discrimination. I mean, sexism and discrimination are everywhere. If February is Black History Month and March is Women's History Month, what happens the rest of the year? The answer is discrimination. That is one of the posters of the Guerrilla Girls. So for the next 30 minutes, I declare this a sexist-free zone. Actually, we are in a Montana Art Museum, this badass museum that really promotes women artists. So this is a sexist-free zone. I don't even have to declare it a sexist-free zone. And you'll be all happy to know that this is not going to be a lecture, it's a party. And you are all on the VIP list. Okay, and what would a party be without food, right? And party favors. If you are not in this bag, please put your name in, because we're going to have a drawing at the end for a complete set of Guerrilla Girl on Tour posters. And speaking of food, who wants a banana? My favorite part of the show. Anybody hungry? Here you go. Come on, someone. Okay, this is the famous banana toss. Ready? Anyone in the back? Oh, good job. I will try not to hit the artwork. Good job. Okay, who else? What's a banana? I have 3 left. Oh, great. Almost. There you go. Okay, excellent. Okay, so let's do this. Let's have a survey now. How many people here identify as feminists? Oh, wait a minute. Don't raise your hands yet. I forgot. We're in Montana. This is a delicate subject. Right? So, I know, but you never know. There could be some interlopers. Okay, so if you identify as a feminist, raise your hand. Well, first of all, close your eyes, everyone. Close them up. So this will be a secret ballot, so no one will know if you raise your hand tonight, okay? So if you identify as a feminist, raise your hand now. Oh, wait, still, keep it up. Oh, sorry. Keep it up. This is gonna ruin my joke. Okay, ready? Okay, good. Open your eyes. Put your hands down. You'll be happy to know that everybody in this room is a feminist. Yay! And if you don't believe me, while you had your eyes closed, I took a picture, ran down to the Holiday Inn Business Center, and had to turn to a slide, and here you are.
Open your
Everyone is a feminist. This is great. Okay, so, and this is a great time to be feminism. Feminism is it's new now. It's all hot again. It's a great time to be a feminist, right? Because feminism is sweeping this country. It is a swift wind sweeping this country. And it's great to be the wind, right? The wind has the power to change things, correct? The wind is unpredictable. The wind can mess things up. So this afternoon, I'm going to share with you some of the ways that the Guerrilla Girls mess things up with feminism. This is a picture taken at our at an anniversary party that we had. You can see the rubber gorilla mask that we wore, and everyone is holding up their name of the dead woman artist. So I wrote this memoir because I started to think about, how did I get here? How did I get in this rubber gorilla mask, walking around as Afro-Ben and trying to promote artists and equality and gender parity? How did I get here? So I took a long, hard look at my life, and I really figured out that it started when I was very young. Half of this book is about my experience as a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. When I went to school for theater. I got my degree in theater in upstate New York at SUNY Brockport. I moved to New York City immediately after that and wanted to be an actress. Within 6 weeks of moving to New York City, I met an actor named William Hurt. Yes, that William Hurt. We had a 3+ year relationship that was full of violence. And it took me 12 years to even identify the fact that I had been abused. It took me 35 years to write my story. I speak now to anybody in this room who's a survivor of violence and assault, and tell you that my book is not about everyone has to tell their story. I firmly respect everyone's story, and as it was 35 years, it was time for me to tell my story, but it is absolutely fine for you to nurture your story, because disclosure is a process. And I write, perhaps my story will send the message that it is fine to keep your story right where it is, safely hidden away. It is okay to store your story, as I did, inside for as long as you wish. You can keep your story to yourself, wait on it, nurture it, remember it, or maybe someday let it go without a sound, or you can let it out. And so my book is about how I went from this to this. And this is me and Officer Purcell of the NYPD during a Tony protest. He was actually a really fantastic police officer who let us protest the Tonys for about an hour in the year 2000. So how did I become a Guerrilla Girl? I was at a residency and I met this visual artist and I started complaining to her about the lack of women in theater and the lack of women artists of color in theater. And she said to me, you know, I have this book you should read. And she gave me Confessions of the Guerrilla Girls, which is the first book the Guerrilla Girls wrote. And it has all their posters in it. And I read it and I thought, this is exactly what the theater world needs. So the next day when I saw her, I said, do you know any Guerrilla Girls? I really need to speak to them and ask them if they can help us combat discrimination in theater. And she said, yes, I do. You're looking at one. So she was a Guerrilla Girl. And she said, we are taking new members into the group. This was in 1997. The group had been around since 1985. They started by 7 women artists who were attacking sexism in the art world. And by 1997, they had experienced burnout. Women were tired, women were retiring, women were exhausted from doing the work. So they needed new members. So they decided to open up the Guerrilla Girls to other artists, theater artists, choreographers, visual artists. And so I was one of the ones that they let in. And when at my first meeting, I said, you know, I really know very little about the visual art world. What I do know is the theater world, and I think we should attack the theater world. And here's my idea. So I took this famous saying that you will find in every single program in the theater, and I turned it into this. In this theater, the taking of photographs, the use of recording devices, and the production of plays by women is strictly prohibited. The management. During the current season, this theater will produce no plays by women, a public service message from Guerrilla Girls on tour. And so we decided to place this sticker in the toilet stalls of all the bathrooms of all the theaters in New York City that were not producing plays by women or artists of color. So we printed it onto Avery labels. Hint, Avery labels are really hard to remove. And we distributed it to all the Guerrilla Girls interested in our new theater focus. In 1997-98, the Roundabout, Primary Stages, Signature Theater, the New Group, the Atlantic Theater Company, and George Street Playhouse, these are all huge theaters in New York City, are some of the theaters producing main stage seasons of plays written entirely by white men. So we stickered the Roundabout. Every time they opened a show, we would go in, we would sticker the women's rooms. We had men help us that we called baboon boys, sticker the men's room. And then when they would open another show in 6 weeks, we would go back and we would find that they had tried to scrape off the labels and they couldn't scrape them off, so we'd just stick another sticker over that. And guess what happened? The Roundabout announced that in their next season, they would include 2 plays by women, Impossible Marriage by Beth Henley and The Mineola Twins by Paula Vogel. They had not produced a play by a woman in 12 years, since 1986. So of course we took complete credit for the generation. And that's a joke, but it's also something I want to share with you. When you are an activist, it is important to celebrate the wins, no matter how small they are. So we thought, wow, we're going to change American theater with these stickers. It's going to happen for us. And people just need to be aware that this is happening, and then it will change. Of course, what happened is the Roundabout produced those 2 plays by women, and then they went back to producing plays by all white men the next season. We even heard that in an internal meeting, they talked about the stickers, and that we were not stickering anymore, so they went back. I mean, the Roundabout Theater is one of the last theaters in New York City that still tries to get away with producing main stage seasons of plays by all white men. What they do now, some theaters do this, is they'll make a black box theater, which is their 99-seat space in the basement, and that's where they'll stick all the women and all the artists of color, and then they'll say, look, we're not sexist, we're putting them all in the basement. So we say, no, basement's not good enough. So the theater committee was made up of about 6 members of the Guerrilla Girls who were interested in performance art. And we would meet every 28 days. Thank you. And we would, because we were a small committee, we got a lot of work done. I don't know if any of you have tried to make collaborative art or even just collaborate. It's very difficult. So when you have a small group, it's easier to do. And we would make these posters and stickers, and we would present them to the main group of Guerrilla Girls for approval. And that's how we got work done. We also started to get questions around this time. Aren't there just more male playwrights than there are female playwrights? Aren't there just more male artists than there are female artists? And we did what we call the 5-minute research technique, which anyone can do. Open up a newspaper and count. Go into this museum and count. Count how many paintings are by women, how many paintings are by men. We called up the Dramatists Guild, which is like a union for playwrights. 50% of the members are women, 50% are men. The population of the US is about split, even. So we also called MFA programs. How many people are enrolled in MFA programs that are male and that are female, also split. So the answer is no. It's not just that there are more male playwrights than there are female playwrights. And here's another poster. Not a poster, this is a postcard we made to give to people, to send to people like Todd Haynes at the Roundabout. Dear theater producer, I noticed that last season you did not produce one play written by a woman. I know that you are terribly embarrassed by your lack of familiarity with women playwrights and will rectify the oversight in your next season. Love. We always try to put a little spin and a little positivity on it. Here's another one we made. Know your theater lingo. What? White guy writes play, it gets produced. Subplot, less than 18% of plays produced in the U.S. this season were written by women or people of color. Farce, last season was just as bad. Tragedy, the lack of diversity in theater. This is another poster that we also made into a sticker. We did this for approximately 2 years, till around 1999. Our hopes that a lot of people would start paying attention to this didn't happen. Change, as you all know, happens very slow. So those little wins that we celebrated, it was sort of like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. In the theater, and here's the other thing, everyone thinks the arts are liberal, right? The arts are so liberal, they're arts. Artists are all liberals, they're all inclusive. Everyone has a place at the table in the arts, right? But you will find that companies like AT&T probably have more women working at the top and making more money than the arts do. When you go to the upper echelon of any art, Broadway, the Met Museum, the huge museums, huge galleries that have lots and lots of people, lots and lots of money funding them. That's where you will find the least amount of women, the least amount of people of color. So we decided that we were going to attack Broadway, because Broadway is where there are not a lot of women directing, writing, producing, because that's where the money is. And Broadway has an annual award, the Tony Awards. I'm sure you all know about the Tony Awards. So we decided to use the Tony Awards as a vehicle. Women don't win Tonys. People of color don't win Tonys because they don't work on Broadway. The similar thing was done a couple of years ago with the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite, also in the film industry, to raise awareness about that. So 1998 was the 52nd annual Tony Awards. In 52 years, the Tonys had not given one award for directing to a woman. 52 years. This is a horrible statistic, and one that is shocking. We put an ad in a magazine in theater at the time, Popular Theater magazine, that said, and this is another tactic of the girls, to do a pop quiz. Pop quiz, how many women have won a Tony for directing? A 28, B 3, C 0. After we placed this ad, guess what happened? 2 women won Tonys for directing. 1 for directing a play and 1 for directing a musical. And of course, we took complete credit for that too. We just have to put out ads and everything will change. Of course, that didn't happen because the following year, no women won Tonys and no women were not nominated. So after this horrible stat of no women winning Tonys, we had the stat that 2 women had won Tonys. So how do we deal with that? This way. Question: what do toilet stalls at the Tony Awards have in common? Answer: they only let in 1 woman at a time. Only one woman has ever won a Tony for directing a play. Only one woman has ever won a Tony for directing a musical. Guerrilla Girls Conscious, now we're calling ourselves the conscience of the theater world. So here's another, we continue to address Broadway because people know about Broadway and people were paying attention. There's a tragedy on Broadway and it isn't Elektra. Only 8% of the plays and less than 1% of the musicals on Broadway were written by women. Guerrilla Girls think that's even sadder than a Greek tragedy. There's only one explanation for what's currently playing: discrimination. And the way that we got these stats also was very easy. I mean, it took a little more than 5 minutes, but there's an American Theater magazine that does a season preview issue every fall. And we just sat down with it, we counted how many plays across the US are being produced that are written by women, that are written by people of color. This is during the time before we had access to the internet. So we had to physically read these magazines and newspapers. The way we got these stats was in the New York Times theater listings. One of the other ways that we figured out how to attack sex in theater is when we would meet in small groups, we would share stories. We would share our own personal stories as theater artists to each other, and we would talk about applications that we would put in, reactions that we would get as female playwrights, as female directors, and we would share stories with ourselves because, you know, one way that we got people to pay attention to our issue is by using humor. You can't just make a poster that says sexism is bad. Everyone knows that. No one's going to read it, and it's boring, and it doesn't spark conversation. So we had to find a way into the issue that was new and unique. So after a session of talking about our personal stories of how bad it was as female playwrights, we said, why don't we just turn the issue on its head? We will take all of these things that happen to us that are bad, and we will celebrate them instead. And this is what we came up with. Oh, the joys of being a woman playwright. You're in control. You produce your own plays because if you don't, they won't get produced. You're special. During Black History Month or Women's History Month, your work receives at least one staged reading. You're hot. If you're under the age of 30, your career might last a few seasons. You save money. You don't have to buy evening gowns for all those award ceremonies. You live in the moment. No need to obsess about your place in theater history. You won't have one. You don't fear failure. Your breasts are the only things that will flop. The Guerrilla Girls had also made the advantages of being a woman artist, and this is a takeoff on that poster. So we had been working for 2 years now, it's 1999, and we wanted to involve the community. We wanted to involve the public in our efforts. I don't know if many of you have been to New York City. There is a booth called TKTS in Times Square where you can buy half-price tickets to Broadway shows. So we decided we were going to go to the TKTS booth with our stickers and ask people buying tickets to Broadway shows to put our stickers up in the Broadway toilet stalls, okay? So here we are at the TKTS booth giving out bananas, as we always do, and our stickers. Here's another shot of us with our Oh, the Joys of Being a Woman Playwright, and unfortunately everyone thought we were cast members from The Lion King. It's true, they were running up saying, do you have free tickets to Lion King? So this wasn't really, this didn't work. So we had to rethink it. So we thought, let's organize a protest. Let's organize a huge protest of the Tony Awards, and we will invite the public to come join us. So that's what we decided to do in the year 2000. So because Guerrilla Girls wore these huge rubber gorilla masks, you know, the theater artists eventually changed our rubber gorilla mask to this because the mask is really a barrier between me and the audience, and you can't be heard, and you can't see our facial expressions. We changed it to sort of a half mask so you could see half of our face. But when we wore those big, huge masks, you couldn't hear us when we spoke. So we employed we got our cheerleaders to come and join us and to be our voice. The art cheerleaders are a group of women artists from Boston dedicated to heightening the connection between the arts and community interest through cheerleading. So they became our voice with, hey, hey, ho, ho, discrimination on Broadway's got to go. But they also came up with their own cheers about the Tonys. The Tony is baloney because the system doesn't place value on the work of women. That is a disgrace. And things like that. So we were really, really loud with the art cheerleaders. And of course, these are the days before social media. All we had, remember the old email chain? The old email chain you had to send around. We sent it around to everyone we knew. We said, come join us on the steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral, because the Tonys were at Radio City. And here we are with the art cheerleaders. Come be a Gorilla Girl for a day. So we had these bags printed with a gorilla face on the front, and it said, I am a Gorilla Girl on the back, so that everyone could be masked. And we marched down to Radio City. We got a lot of attention. We also made these beautiful capes, these black silk capes that had there's a tragedy on Broadway in the back, so that we would blend in with everyone else in evening gowns. And it was a very interesting protest. Officer Purcell put a cage around us and let us protest there for about an hour. The producer of the Tony Awards came flying out and asking what we were doing, and we tried to tell him that we're trying to shed light on women in theater. And he went, but it's not about the Tonys. And he said, you know, I used to be a Gorilla Girl fan, now I'm not anymore. And he ran back inside. Alec Baldwin was the only celebrity who got out of his limo and went flying over to us and asked us what we were doing and took all of our information. After an hour of protesting, a big, huge NYPD lieutenant or captain or something came over and said, you have to take off your masks or you will all be arrested. And since, I didn't want anyone to know that Meryl Streep was a Gorilla Girl or, that other famous people were behind those masks, we decided to take our masks off. There's a law that dates back to the Ku Klux Klan that says you can't protest wearing a mask. You must show your face. So we didn't want to be arrested. We took our masks off. We went to someone's loft and watched the Tonys. No women won, and we were very depressed. But not undaunted, because since that time, 2000, there have been a lot of groups that have sprung up since we started to attack sexism in theater in the 20 years since then. Groups like the Kilroys. The Kilroys are a group of women in LA who put out a list every year, new plays by women that should be produced. There is the LA Female Playwrights Initiative. There's a group called 50/50 in 2020, calling for 50% representative of women on stages by the year 2020. So we're not alone anymore, and we feel like there is talk about this issue. When we first started and we kept stats, it was less than 50% of all plays produced across the US were written by women. Now it's probably 20%. So there is some progress that has been made, but we still have a long way to go. I'm really lucky, and I really feel lucky and privileged to have been a member of the Gorilla Girls, because it's taken me all around the world and I've had some incredible experiences. Like I got to attend Obama's inauguration. And I got to propose an amendment to the health care bill on the Senate floor. And I even got to have beer with the Pope. Now, I apologize, because I stretched the truth. I didn't have beer with the Pope. I had vodka shots. Make no mistake, I don't spend all my time photoshopping myself into history. Sometimes I use Final Cut Pro. Anyway, now I would like to review, how does one act like a feminist artist? Well, first of all, support women artists. I hope you will buy a copy of my book. I'll stick around and sign it in the lobby afterwards. Buy a copy of Lindsay's book. Support this museum, which has a lot of female artists. If you see a museum, a show by a woman, go see it. If you see a play by a woman, buy a ticket. If you see a theater company that is not producing any plays by women, Montana Repertory, call them up and ask them why they are not doing that. So support women artists everywhere. To act like a feminist artist, you must begin by telling the truth. Artists are the truth tellers. We reflect back to the world the truth of the world. The truth is the heart of any good art and any good activism. We live in a world made up of facts and reality, and we must call out anyone when they lie. Just going back, gather evidence, like I talked about in Guerrilla Girl meetings. Gather the evidence. Use the 5-minute research technique. The more data you have behind you, the better you will be to discuss your issue. The data is out there. You just have to spend a little bit of time culling it out, and so make sure you can back up your argument with statistics. Huddle up. Work in small groups. Invite 2, 3, 4, 5 people over to your house, serve wine, serve cookies, and talk about issues that you want to address. You can get a lot accomplished by working in a small group. And now this sentence I'm about to say is probably the most important thing I will say today. An idea develops slowly if kept inside one mind. An idea develops slowly if kept inside one mind. You must cross-pollinate your ideas. That's how they grow. Think like an expert, because you are one. You have a personal connection to your issue. You have been discriminated against. You know what sexism feels like. You know what violence feels like. You know what your issue feels like. Make it a story. Tell your personal story. Share your story, because people want to hear your story. They don't want to hear just a bunch of stats. Make it personal and share your story. Learn how to play defense. We are on the defensive team right now, except that we live in a patriarchal world. We are fighting now for our rights, for reproductive rights, for LGBT rights, for immigrant rights, for health rights, for transgender rights. We have to fight for all of these rights, and we are on the defense. So learn how to play it. You know, come up with some trick plays. Be sneaky. Create distractions so that your teammates can score. And if you fail, shake it off and move on to the next play. This is all about forward thinking, not about thinking about the past. Use humor. So you make someone laugh, you get their attention. Never forget to use humor to get someone's attention. Be like the wind. And believe. We got this. We got this, okay? We have to believe. We must work hard. We must invent. We must collaborate. We must find a way to stay positive and celebrate the wins no matter how small they are. I'm just going to end with reading just a little bit from the end of my book. When I started writing a memoir, my friends and colleagues told me I would learn something about myself that I never knew before. And I thought, no, I won't. I know everything about myself. But I did. I learned something that I never knew before, and this is from that chapter. Even though courage and strength were gifted to me by birth, by my parents, by some divine being, I lost the ability to forgive myself. I defined myself by my relationship to other, movie star's girlfriend, formerly battered woman, heroine savior of women in theater. All the potential for a brilliant life vanished when, at the age of 23, I moved to New York City, got a job waiting tables in Greenwich Village, and put my life on hold. How could I have messed up so much? For a long, long time, I could not stop thinking, what if, what if, what if? What if I had never met Bill? I would have become a success. What if I had not been battered? I would have become a success. What if I had not spent so much time as an advocate for other artists? I would have become a success. I missed out on becoming the person I should have become. This permeated my thoughts every day, consuming me with regret for the one very wrong choice that resulted in a life lived in fear of making more mistakes. I waited and waited and waited to make a lot of money, garner recognition, and be an artist. Until my artistic output was heard, seen, experienced by many, I was a failure. I believed that fame was the only measure of my talent. Until I achieved it, I remained a nameless nobody. Afro-Ben saved me. Creative and funny, strong and intrepid, Afro-Ben fearlessly co-opted a name and an identity and ventured out to create change. Afro-Ben made mistakes, forgave herself, and moved on. Afro-Ben was a success because her gorilla mask protected her from ever measuring herself against the world. Success, what is it really? But the ability to crawl out of the error of low self-esteem and never go back. Getting cast in a theater production or a movie or having my play produced does not make me an artist. Art is in me, lives in my soul. The vibration inside fights a way out to make stuff up. Nobody has to buy this stuff, this art, or look at it or produce it. It is art because I am an artist and I made it up. If it is the truest stuff I can make, it is a success. Not to say that getting money for your art is not okay, it is, but it is no longer the criterion by which I identify myself as an artist. I have been a woman with no identity and a woman with a fake identity. From nameless girlfriend of somebody famous to a gorilla mask activist, I am ready to unmask. I am Donna Kaz. I am Afro-Ben. I am an artist, an activist, and a survivor. I am gender parity and feminism and humor. I am theater and I am comedy, and I am perfect rhythm and I am talent. I am success. I am a success. With all my secrets revealed, I go forward without a barrier between me and the world. I take complete responsibility for every part of my amazing life, everything that has ever happened to me, all of it sewn together now, rough seams and all. The clouds move one way above me, and the earth moves another way below me. I am at the center of it all. My story is at the end of a pencil poised over an empty page. I picked the pencil up and wrote. Thank you very much. We are going to do a Q&A now, together, but first, the drawing.
Can I give you one more?
Yes. Okay. Mix it up, mix it up.
Drum roll.
Drum roll, thank you. And the winner is Lauren Norby. Here you go. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay. Anybody have any questions for us? We will be happy to answer.
So what is the current situation with the Gorilla Girls?
Okay, so in 2001, the Gorilla Girls split up into 3 separate groups. I talk about this very briefly in my book because it would be probably a whole other book to talk about this, but being in an activist collective was very, very difficult, especially one that was a grassroots organization at first. The Gorilla Girls name became a cachet, a very popular, a trademarkable thing. And a lot of the girls had disagreements about which way to go. To make a long story short, we decided to split. So there's Gorilla Girls Inc., which is made up of the visual artists, Gorilla Girls On Tour is made up of the theater artists, and Gorilla Girls Broadband, formed from a lot of the younger members of the group, and they do a lot of interactive activism on the web, ggbb.org. So the more Masked Avengers, the better. We were able to figure it out, how to continue on, but it was difficult. Yes?
For Lindsay, have you seen HBO's The Deuce, and if so, what do you think of it?
I haven't started it yet. I'm a binge watcher,
Okay.
so I'm sort of waiting until the first season is out. I'm very intrigued, though. I've heard a lot of good things and a lot of not so good things. So, have you watched it?
I have. I think it's only 3 episodes in, so they're still kind of getting the band together, I think. But it looks like it's going to be pretty interesting, I think. I mean, David Simon's pretty good, and it seems like it's talking about some of the things you're addressing, and hopefully it'll go to good places. So.
Yeah, the dirty good old days.
Great.
I guess, depending on who you ask, you know. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
The Guerrilla Girls didn't include men in their guerrilla activities, did they?
No, and I write about this in the book. We had a retreat, and that was one of the issues. There were many guerrilla girls who wanted men to become members of the group. We were often accused of being sexist ourselves because we had no women in the group. Because we were masked too, we were accused of a lot of things. In fact, we would have women of color on stage in mask, and we would be accused of having no women of color in the group. And a lot of people, we got a lot of love, but we also got a lot of criticism of you're not doing enough. You have to address women in music, you have to address women in film, you have to address women, you have to include more people in your group, you have to include men in your group. So we actually decided to talk about this. At the time, I was the one guerrilla girl. I mean, I was leading the argument of not having men in the group, because at that point, I was still dealing with my own, my own issues with violence, and I felt it would be I felt that I couldn't share a space like that with men in the group. I felt that it would be unsafe. So what happened is we decided to table the argument and talk about it at a later date. Now I feel completely different, but it's because I've evolved as, in my own head. I think that men should be in the group. Guerrilla Girls on Tour actually works with a lot of men as designers of some of our theater performances. So I don't feel that way, but at that time, which was in the year 2000, that's how I felt. So I write about that, and I was very embarrassed by it too. I felt like, why can't I get over this? And it's stupid for me to sort of not trust a space with men, but that's where I was at the time, and my recovery as a survivor has taken, it took that for me to actually voice that. Yes.
What's your next act?
Well, Guerrilla Girls on Tour we tour plays and performances. We have a show going up next Friday in New Jersey called If You Can Stand the Heat, The History of Women and Food. We tour another play called Feminists Are Funny, which is just an overview of feminism and a celebration. We try to create comedies and performances and street theater that addresses all of these issues. I serve as the artistic director of Guerrilla Girls on Tour, and we function more like a touring theater company. So while I was writing the book, it took me 4 years to write the book. For a couple of years, we didn't really do much. But now, ever since Trump was elected, the phone is ringing off the hook. People need people to kind of address these issues. So yes, involved in protests, involved in the Women's March, involved in protests in New York City, where we're based, whenever we can. Involved in things that the Women's March is doing in the future. It's hard to keep up. Yeah.
Speaking of the Women's March, I guess I'm curious of both of your perspectives briefly on this kind of explosion of feminism in the wake of this last election, and how kind of brought all these disparate elements of feminism together, and how it's kind of a rocky road as far as going forward in some kind of unified direction.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, feminism has always been sort of a disjointed movement. And I think it still is, and that it didn't go away, maybe there's just more press about it now, and I still think that it's very hard to organize and very hard to pull forward. I thought the Women's March was brilliant, though. I grew up protesting the Vietnam War. I was very excited to see a big march like that, and to be a part of that energy. I don't know if you participated or if you.
No, I was here when it happened. So I didn't get to be part of the big one.
There was one here though.
There were.
100,000 people in Helena.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Right.
100,000 in a state this size.
Yes.
It's like a tenth of the state.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, as far as the explosion of feminism, I think it goes back before the election, though. Like, I don't remember exactly when it was, but Beyonce did a stage show, or maybe it was even on tour, where she had a huge, just the word feminism, or feminist, I think, lit up behind her when she was on stage. And I remember just seeing this image everywhere. People were like losing their minds, like, oh my God, Beyonce's a feminist, like, this is huge. And then of course there was all the requisite arguing about whether she could be a feminist because she danced sexy on stage. Was that okay? And back to the sex wars that feminism has always been involved with. But from where I stand, I've been really heartened to see more, as we call it, sex positive feminism taking center stage, where the idea that being a sexual being does not mean that you can't be a feminist. And that's very black and white language, but there's a lot of feminist feeling early in sort of the modern feminist movement was that you can't be sexy because being, traditionally feminine and sexy is a result of the patriarchy, and you can't use your body that way, and you're not a real feminist if you're into primarily sex work. And I've seen over the past, particularly 5 years maybe, a lot more discussion around sex work as possibly a feminist act. Reclaiming the money that sex work brings in from a lot of, men, patriarchal places, and spreading that around, into the female community and into the sex work community and other underprivileged communities. But there's also just more discussion from actual people who are involved in sex work happening online right now. There are people who do sex work who are writing their own articles. I write a lot of articles about pornography, but I don't have to anymore. There are porn stars who write their own articles that get published in huge publications now. And that's fantastic. We're actually hearing from the people who do the work, and they're not automatically being, brushed off as, oh, well, you're a prostitute. You couldn't possibly have anything good to say, which I think has happened to a lot of people over the years. And that is not happening so much anymore. People are being listened to because feminism is such a hot issue. The difficulty there, though, is always that because feminism is such a hot topic right now, you can sort of plaster the label feminist on something and people will buy into it. And a lot of the time it's not really feminist. But at least people are talking about it. At least it's out there in a big way. And I'm really happy about that.
I think it's important, there's a lot of dialogue has to happen within the feminist movement, between feminists. I think there's a lot of arguing that goes on, and there's a lot of accusing, there's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of split without communication. And that has happened from the beginning, from the first, with women of color. And white women, cisgender women saying that this is our movement and how to include people. The important thing is to have everyone at the table. Everyone needs a voice at the table, but who's controlling the table? You have to make sure that the table is also being shared, the control of the table. So that is very difficult. In my own experience, we got a lot of hate mail from women. And a lot of accusations, and it's sort of sad because you want dialogue. You don't want. So I would just say that that's what has to happen. People have to talk to each other and listen. Yeah.
I'm wondering what would your working definition of feminism be?
Well, I love Roxanne Gay's answer to this question. It says feminism is a perfectly good definition. And we don't need to add to it or embellish it. It's just what it is. I think that the concept that there's different concepts of feminism is one that holds us back. I think feminism is equality for women and girls, period. There's a lot of other things that people maybe put onto that, but we also get that question a lot. How do you define feminism? As if there are many different interpretations of it. I don't really think there are. Maybe you have a different answer.
No, particularly in the porn world, there's a whole lot of discussion around feminist porn right now. It's a very hot issue. And there's constantly waves of people going, wait, what, feminist porn? What? That's not possible. And then I write an article about it, and then like a year later, people are like, wait, what, feminist porn? That's a thing? I don't understand. And I write an article about it. So there's always a sort of an evolving idea of what feminism means in that context. But in my book, I took a definition from the Feminist Porn Awards, what they defined it as. And then I took a definition from the Feminist Porn book and what they define feminism as. But in the end, my favorite one is actually from a porn star named Jessica Drake, who told me in a conversation that she just thinks the best definition for feminism is treating people the way they should be treated. Treating people with respect. Particularly focusing on women and girls, you know, as an underprivileged group. But everyone should be, like you said, be able to come to the table and be able to speak, and everyone should be able to listen. I think that's really the most important part.
Yes.
Have you or would you ever consider teaching at the college level? Like at a women's studies program? Just
I'm trying to get a job right now. Do you know of one? I mean, literally,
I'm at a university that has money, but
I would.
I just thought you'd be great.
Yeah, I would. I would love to. Yeah. Lindsay, are you interested in?
Oh, I don't know. I've never really thought about it. I don't think I'm qualified at this point, but maybe someday.
I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you. Yes.
It's overrated.
Yes.
I'm just curious if you had any comments or thoughts about Hugh Hefner's death and how his legacy has impacted feminism in any way, or how we think about sex and sex positivity, or if he had no... I'm just curious, what do you think?
It's sort of a huge question. I honestly haven't had a whole lot of time to think about it and grapple with it. I think this is sort of a broader answer, but I've seen on the internet, particularly on Twitter, there's a hashtag, you know, RIP Hef. And there were all these people on the one side saying, he was horrible, he was a misogynist, he did terrible things, he objectified women. And then there's all these people on the other side saying, no, you don't understand the great things that he did. He fought against sexism, and he fought against racism, and he pushed forward, you know, the sex culture so far. And it kind of feels to me like someone, as soon as he died, someone somewhere behind the scenes like drove a wedge into the conversation. It's so divided, just like every other conversation that is being had on a massive scale in America right now. I don't know that much about his life. You know, I sort of know the broad strokes. But I know that, yes, he did objectify women, and he did make a lot of money on objectifying women and putting naked women on the pages of his magazine. But he also was an advocate for equality, you know, in race, in sex. He was an advocate for the fact that you could enjoy talking about sex and having sex, and that was okay. It was okay to be a Hollywood starlet and be naked sometimes. Like, hey, no judgment. That's fantastic. That's a huge step. So I kind of think, like, in the end, he's like most people. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, and because he was such an influential person, he did a lot of good and he did a lot of bad. And there's a lot of nuance there. So I've been really disappointed to see people, you know, going at each other's throats talking about this man like he can only be a wholly good entity or a wholly bad entity. He was both, and he was complicated, and there was a lot to it.
You know, the same thing happened when Joan Rivers died. People were saying she's such a feminist, and she's the first, and the other people say she was horrible, and the same thing happened. So, yeah, I don't know that much. I mean, I really don't know enough about him to make a comment about him. I just would also talk about, you know, it's for someone who, you know, had dealings with horrible dealings with a celebrity. You know, I often think about, you know, I'm through with Woody Allen and I'm through with Roman Polanski. That's my personal thing. I don't expect anyone else to be that way. You do have to think about someone's art and the way they behave in public, and make a decision about that. And I suppose that's the same with Hef. I mean, you know, and what people think about him that way. So everyone's got to make their own decision.
You know, I used to be very critical of Playboy bunnies until we met someone here in Montana who was a Playboy bunny in the 70s. And 70s, yeah. No, she was running that one. She was eternally thankful for the job because her income was so significant in that job compared to any other job she could come up with at that time. So it kind of made me rethink my thoughts on that enterprise. But she said I couldn't get a job that paid what that job paid.
Right, and I mean, when it comes to sex work of all kinds, a lot of people want to look down their noses at it, but a lot of people who maybe don't have the ability to get other work can make a lot of money and do a lot of good with the income that they can make on sex work. You know, whether you see it as exploitation or not, that's a really complicated topic. But a lot of people who do that kind of work are doing it for their own very good reasons and making a lot of money at it.
Any more questions? Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the origins of sex-positive feminism? You might have addressed that in the very beginning, we walked in a little bit late, like, but when did that branch start to emerge and become part of a, I don't know, national or international dialogue?
That's a really good question. I mean, because of my particular wheelhouse, I pretty much look at everything through the lens of pornography, so there's that. And what I know about sex-positive feminism comes through pornography. And that was, I'm not going to remember the years exactly.
Third wave feminism really started that dialogue.
The 90s.
Yeah, and there were two groups. Oh, I'm probably going to get the names wrong. I think the first one was in New York City. There was a group of sex workers and porn stars called Club 90. It was started by Annie Sprinkle, Candida Royale, Veronica Hart, 2 or 3 other women, who would just get together at one of their apartments and sort of vent about being a woman, trying to be, you know, some of them did private sex work and some of them did porn and a lot of them did both. And they would just talk to each other. It was sort of like a support group for sex workers. And they became very public about what they were doing because they thought it was really important for women who were doing this kind of work to have a support system. And they became sort of a big deal in sex-positive feminism. And then on the West Coast in San Francisco, Nina Hartley started the Pink Ladies along with a few other people whose names are not coming to me right now. And many of them were strippers, sex workers, and porn stars also. And they sort of saw what was happening with Club 90 and started their own group in San Francisco. And so those two groups were very influential in, you know, the sex work aspect of sex-positive feminism, and they're my personal heroes. If any of you don't know about Annie Sprinkle's work, look her up. She was a private sex worker, you know, porn star. She's now an artist and a sex-positive artist, and she is leading the ecosexual movement, which is taking the idea of, instead of looking at the Earth as Mother Earth, which she thinks might not be sexy enough to get people interested, and taking it on as a lover. So she and her partner, Beth Stevens, who is also an artist, have been going on tour around the world and marrying the earth in these elaborate, ridiculous art ceremonies where they married coal once, and they had a whole wedding where everything was coal themed, and they get all of these artists to come and perform, and they wear outrageous outfits. They married the ocean, they married the dirt, they married the trees. And people will just contact them and ask them to, oh, come to this event and marry the earth in some way. And they do these giant spectacles. It's so cool. So cool.
Someone else had a question here? Yeah.
I was wondering about, in terms of protests, and you touched on what you think is effective using humor and so forth, and the wake of like the Colin Kaepernick NFL kneeling protests, if you've had good luck or bad luck with the way you protest, you talked about the masks being effective and also problematic, and what's working now and what?
Well, I think that knee is working. I mean, that silent knee is working, isn't it? Everyone's upset about that knee. And I thought, and when I was thinking about it, just that gesture, that silent gesture is so powerful. And it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I think that then when other people started to do it, that was powerful. The Guerrilla Girls on Tour did a silent protest in China. We were a part of this art exhibit called 365 Art, where for every day in the year, I think it was 2005, they had public art somewhere. So we went and we did a silent movement piece about domestic violence. It was very effective because, first of all, we really stood out in China and people were just coming up to us and watching us. It's always important to, when you do protest, to have a way that people can contact you about what you're doing. So we gave out email addresses and postcards that said what we were doing and a way for people to get back. But I think the silent protest is great. And the fact that people can do it. I mean, that sort of knee is a very simple gesture, and I think people understand. If I was just to go down on a knee, people will know what I'm doing, right? So I think that's extremely effective, and I think we need more things like that that are simple, that everyone can do. Everyone can click on things and sign petitions, and I think that all of that is really important. I just think we have to think beyond that because we're dealing with something so big. So, and the issues are coming so fast that we need to deal with. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? This is fabulous. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks to everybody who came out this morning, and this panel or this reading kind of happened organically, and I'm excited about the way that things like this happen. Lindsay is living here locally in Missoula and contacted me at some point this summer, and I was excited about Donna, and I'm like, we know two of them together, and so it just worked out great. So, and speaking of like taking a knee, free speech, activism, silent protest, our down at Fact and Fiction at 1 o'clock, Jane Little-Botkin will be reading, I hope I'm saying that right, from her book about her great-granduncle, Frank Little, who was a very well-known free speech activist. And anyway, it just seems like a good segue. And I know that I say that, I'm like, I really hope that is happening at one. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, even if that's not happening, something really wonderful is happening somewhere else. So